I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to say welcome to each of you who are present. At this time, before we get started, I want to go over our board norms and protocols. We agreed to respect the differences of opinions in making decisions for the district, to follow best practices in managing the superintendent and the management of the board itself, to stay on task when conducting business for the district, including while at board meetings, to never surprise the superintendent or each other when conducting official business of the district, to read these norms at the beginning of each board meeting and at board workshops as a reminder of how to conduct our meetings, to continually self-check to determine if we are following our norms when conducting district business. With that in mind, we will go ahead and have our board clerk, Ms. Westfall, do the roll call.
Maxine Drew.
Maxine Drew present.
Yolanda Clark.
Yolanda Clark present.
Jenny Humphreys.
Cheney present.
Randy Lopez.
Randy Lopez present.
Wanda Brownlee Page.
Wanda Brownlee Page present.
Valdina Nguyen. I know she's there. I saw her.
She dropped off because she couldn't hear us.
And Stacy Yeager.
Stacy present.
She was muted. Is Mr. Fives on?
Yes, I'm here. She did drop off and looks like she's coming back here in a minute.
Okay.
There she is.
Who are you talking about? Me?
You,
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
I couldn't hear
You can
you.
hear now? Right.
I can hear now.
Yeah, that wasn't at our end.
Okay.
Okay, Susan, thank you. Could I get a motion that we approve the special agenda?
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the special agenda. Susan, would you do the roll call for voting?
Yep. Just a sec. Maxine Drew.
Maxine Drew, yes.
Yolanda Clark.
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Jenny Humphreys.
Cheney, yes.
Randy Lopez.
Randy, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page.
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Valdina Nguyen.
Valdina Nguyen, yes.
Stacy Yeager.
Stacy, yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much. We're now ready for board discussion and possible action regarding administrative contracts.
Would you like me to start, Mrs. Drew?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Drew, and thank you, board, and Dr. Faust, and Mr. Goheen for, and Susan,
Thanks.
for taking time out of our busy day. And of course, thank you for the participants listening in. Everyone knows that we are in a global pandemic crisis. Everyone knows that our federal, state, and local funds will decrease. But yet, as board members, we still must take responsibility and make some hard decisions. We are not here tonight to fire people. We made that point very clear when we left on Tuesday night. We're looking to cut costs where we can and to right a wrong. But as it goes, there are always people who want to stir up fear. I've received phone calls that some of those people are even on the board. But as Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high. Now, there is no debate about this board having clear budgetary authority to oversee all financial affairs. This board has the legal authority to create our annual budgets, and it has a responsibility of oversight. We are still in negotiations with the teachers, and we still have many departmental budgets in review. But tonight, we're here to focus on administrative contracts. They amount to about $16 million out of about $400 million budget, and actually maybe to write a potential fraud. Now, unknown to many people is the fact that the board never approved many of the provisions of some of these contracts. I will repeat, the board never approved some provisions of some of the contracts because the board never saw them before the last month or so. In fact, for some contracts, 10 to 12 months passed before we even saw the provisions. When some of us continued to ask about various contracts, we were met with resistance and told that they did not even know where they were. Then we looked up one day and there were signed addendums without being formally approved by the full board as well. But here we are, May 1st, 2020. Now we're faced with a strict deadline of renewals by May 15th, just like all school districts who are in this middle of the budgetary cycle. But please understand that most of the board members want to serve the employees of USD 500 and the people of KCK with dignity and integrity as we do our best to fulfill our fiduciary oversight responsibility. Madam President, I believe that we should, and I believe that we can, conduct our oversight responsibilities in the public eye and protect the privacy of all employees. These are public dollars. Furthermore, I believe that the taxpayers of Kansas City, Kansas deserve to hear and see how we are spending their tax dollars. And during the public discussion, at any time that the discussion gets too close to the place where it may violate privacy, I believe that we would then move immediately into executive session. We are elected officials and we know the rules of protecting privacy. Tonight, we're discussing provisions of administrative contracts as a group, not individual contracts. But I also understand fully that this is a board decision. So I now turn the meeting back over to you so that we as a board can make that decision. The question before us now is, will we stay in open session to discuss making adjustments or possible, or will we adjourn to executive session to discuss the possibility of making adjustments? Of course, if that is the desire of the board, we then must return to open session with possible action to follow. So Madam Chair, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Any other comments from other board members? Considering we have quite a bit to discuss, my recommendation is that we move to our executive session.
I do have a couple of questions that are in general that can be discussed outside.
Okay, go ahead.
I do have a couple of concerns about what statement was just read. The budget was mentioned, and of course we are in COVID-19. My concern is, have we had an opportunity, or were our CFO Dennis or Dr. Fausto Maxine aware of our desire or your desire to look into cutting or modifications based upon a budget? Have we received any recommendations from our financial officer relating to this concern?
I haven't received anything other than what we have been, what has been brought forth to us from our last meeting up until today.
Dr. Nguyen, have you had any request, or was there any discussion with the superintendent or our board president relating to modifying based upon COVID-19 contracts or salary or anything?
Those have, yes, Dr. Yeager, that has been the subject in general of our budgetary comments for the last 2 or 3 meetings. Every time Mr. Covington makes his presentation, he is first and foremost saying, in view of COVID-19, in view of the uncertainty of the legislature returning, in view of, $1 billion shortfall in the state general budget, of which 50% is K-12, yes, the entire context of our budgetary discussions has been surrounding COVID-19 and what are we going to do if we get
Well,
$0 or if we don't know what we're going to get. So yes, that has been the source of his conversation.
but to my understanding, there's no recommendation. So I guess I'm getting clarification. Help me understand. Are we planning to go through all 141 records today? What is the plan? Because it is 4 o'clock. What is our goal? Do we have a time frame? How in depth are we going? I guess I need more direction because I asked for this direction on Tuesday and did not receive it. What is the intent?
The intent is what I said, and of course, what the staff provided us, a review of the administrative contracts. We said we were looking at them as a group, and that in view of COVID-19, if we were to have zero funds, what would we do? Again, the same approach we're taking with the teachers. We still actually and honestly have other employee groups that we need to consider. So we're not doing anything that is not in our jurisdiction to provide some other directives to our administration. But remember, our administration has provided us with a lot of data that can help us provide, or will help provide us with insight as to how can we save jobs. You know, we made that very clear. No one is looking to cut any jobs. We also made it clear that we're up against this May 15th deadline. We have it's only fair to our employees and this employee group here to look, see where we can make some cuts, small cuts as they may be, but still concern ourselves with the education of 22,000 students.
And I appreciate that. And as you mentioned fairness, could you explain why I asked why was race and ethnicity added?
Excuse me?
I asked why was race and ethnicity, and male and female or gender added to our contract review. Could you help me understand, and maybe it's something that's nothing, but I asked, we've never looked at the race of our employees when making decisions. We've never looked at the gender. And when I asked why are these on here, I was advised that when we said that we agreed to add additional areas, that, for example, you asked about adding the administrative position for 3 years, the salary, which is fine, but I do not believe that we agreed to add the race of every person or the gender. So could you help me understand why those were added? And I'm not feeling really comfortable about adding these 2 areas to our review simply because I believe they go against our policy GAAA. So if you could help provide insight as to why those 2 categories were added.
Whenever, I'll put it like this, from my experience as a state legislator serving on the K-12 budget committee, all types of data are included in discussions of employment, distribution, gender, and in fact, I guess, as a minority school district, as well as a growing interest in equity and inclusion, it's just additional demographic information. Hopefully we don't make any differences based on those categories for income.
Well, that's again why I was concerned why these were added. And also, I don't believe board members knew that that was one of the areas that was requested to be added to this spreadsheet.
I believe I was fully transparent in sending information to board members of all the data that we want to address. We have that data, and we look at that data for all our employees too. So it's not anything to feel threatened by, and it is nothing to fear. So I'll respect your concern, but there is no motive to do anything other than additional insight that we may gather.
Thank you. Does any other board members have any questions or comments? So again, I recommend that it would be best if we go into executive session.
Well,
So
before you do that, I want to make sure if you're going to go into executive session, the only basis to go into executive session is for personnel information if you're going to discuss specific individuals. If it is going to be a discussion just generally or broadly about positions as a whole or topics as a whole, there wouldn't be a basis to go into executive session. So again, without knowing what you're doing specifically,
thank you.
You know, unless you're going to talk about specific individuals, there's no basis to go into executive session.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So since we will stay in open session, and if there are no other discussion, then the only thing that we can do is possibly let's vote as the direction we're going to go and move forward.
Would you like me to make some comments, Ms. Drew?
If you have other comments, you may do so.
Sure. Then as looking at administrative contracts as a group, I would like to suggest that we, as many as are interested, to make suggestions as to how we can cut some cost, and we can put I have about 9 suggestions, no telling how many other people may have. And so one way could be to list them all, or take them and then take them one by one to consider whether the board as a whole would consider making adjustments to warrant some cost savings.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? One of the, I've been listening to everything that is taking place, and one of the things I want us to be considerate is the fact that we have to do and follow what is good for ourselves and everyone that are part of our school district. Our administrative staff has done a fabulous job in making sure that the questions, the concerns, and everything that has been presented by the board members come to them, they answer them at all times. And I do have to point out that there have been some extremely quite lengthy questions and tasks that were requested in order for them to be able to do. We know that we are in this pandemic right now with COVID-19. And I do have to say that our consideration of knowing that these people have worked extremely hard dealing with that, and then having to try to answer the questions that were being submitted. We tried to make sure that when we come to our board meetings that there are no surprises, that we can decently answer questions and come to a mutual agreement in trying to make sure that it's taken place. But because there were so many questions coming in right before our board meetings, what we tried to do was to ask for the questions prior to the board meeting. So many of those questions have been coming up, and so much so that it has prevented them from actually doing their jobs that they need to do. And because of the fact that, like I said, we are in this process where things are going on, that it's a little bit difficult to try to do their jobs daily and then turn around and do what the board members have been requesting. I'm not saying that those questions were not important. I'm just saying that we need to be conscious and considerate of the fact that these people are doing the job. For some of the questions that were submitted last time, it took at least 3 days for them to compile all of the information that was submitted through those questions. My question is, how can they do their job if they are doing the work by the board? They are working now at a time that has put our district in a level of success to make sure that the needs of our students, the teachers, and the community are being met. They have been working countless hours above and beyond the days of this epidemic, and we have to recognize that as a school board, we have to try to promote unity in order for us to be able to appreciate the work that is being done in order for that to be able to take place. It has been individualized, which is good, but when we do this as a board, we show unity of the hard work that they have done to let the district to be able to do what is necessary. We are on a path that has never been done or seen in the history of education. So how do we address it? My suggestion is that we do it collectively together to let the staff know that they are doing the very best and how appreciative we are for what they're doing. The hours that they work has been very overwhelming. I am suggesting that in looking at these contracts of the administrative staff, that it may not be done at this particular time. Because when you consider about the deadline date that's coming up within the month of May, having to comply with the guidelines, my question is, do we really want to do this? Now, if, mind you, we're going to address it, it should have been done before now. When we look at the scale of the work that they have contributed, it weighs much more than what we're discussing now. Our role as a board can be interpreted in numerous ways. If you read between the lines, you can look at it in different perspectives. It's just like looking at a glass of water. If you look at it, do you see it as half full or half empty? It's your perspective. And in this, what we see when we follow our board policies, one perspective see it one way, another in a different way. So what I'm suggesting is that is why we must try to unify and work collectively together to constantly let our stakeholders see that we are unified, not just using negative languages, negative comments to tear down the work that's being done. Our way of connecting together is through the right way of communicating. And I believe that that's a way that we are not working as a board, that at times we're sending out the wrong messages to our stakeholders. So I would recommend that we address the contracts, not now, but at a later date as we go into our next school year. There is so much that we need to look at. And I'm not saying that the answers are right or wrong. I'm just saying I don't think it's appropriate time for us to do that. Table it and let's look at it later and then address it in the way in which we can effectively take the time to do what is necessary to look at each one of them.
Mr. Drew, thank you for your comment, but let's not waste a lot of time. We said this was what the meeting is about. I would make a motion that we have a vote now as to whether we're going to continue this discussion so we don't keep going around the block. It does not mean that we don't respect what they've done. We do. But I make a motion that we have a vote on whether we're going to continue with this evening right now. And this back and forth, we're wasting time. Now, either we're going to do it or we're not going to do it. So my motion was that we make a vote to deal with this issue today.
Second.
Okay, what is the issue? That's why I need clarification.
No, Ms. Drew, it's not that we asked for the meeting to deal with administrative contracts as a group. I made the motion that we deal with the issue today. We were going to list things that we were concerned with and move on, because it's back and forth. No, we do. You're right. We do need to move on, but we need to do it today. And if we do it today, as was stated in another meeting, It will be carried on. And again, I'm going to keep saying this. And it was said earlier by Dr. Nguyen. We're not here to take anybody's job. That is a rumor. That is false. We didn't say we disrespected anyone, but I made the motion. It's been second. Let's vote to see where we proceed to. Thank you.
May I, this is Yolanda. May I ask a quick question? And Ms. Nguyen, Dr. Nguyen, this may be a question more for you. When we're having this discussion today, are we looking at the 21-22 budget for the school year? Are we saying we know the conversation needs to happen, maybe no changes are happening for this next school year, but future? I just want to make sure I'm on the same page with you.
This is Valdina Nguyen, and thank you for that question. And I guess we're at the discussion phase of this motion. Yes, this is 1920 is over. Their contracts, all contracts, Mr. Goheen said, if any changes were to be made, today was the drop dead date.
Okay.
May 15th is the statutorily, and correct me, Mr. Goheen, if this is correct, our deadline. So my explanation will be, and direct answer, we should be prepared. Make a motion, have a discussion on specific proposal to maybe cut a cost. Vote it up, vote it down, move on.
Okay.
But
And so
looking at 2021 budget as then providing some direction to the administration to start adding those smaller components while they're working on however many other departments we have, because we do have employee groups that wages are their lifeline. Out of respect to them, we have deadlines. Let's meet those deadlines. And those are, in my opinion, providing some stability and assurance that they will have a job with this rate of wage.
Okay, very fair. I have a secondary question here in the same vein there. When we're talking about budget, looking at our budget, and I think as a board, definitely that is our due diligence. Are you also saying that if the cut may not necessarily come from anything with the administrative contracts, it could come, budget cut can come from anywhere? Are we looking at it as a board? Are we looking at it overall, or even asking Dr. Faust, like, where do you see budget cuts coming from? Or are we directly channeling in on contracts?
Today,
I'm sorry for so many questions.
No. Today, you had, for a special meeting, we had to notice up
Specifically contracts. Okay.
Specifically contract. And that while we may, well, first and foremost, if you had the opportunity to look at the state statutes, along with the handbook, along with board policy, we have broad reaching authority. You can't do a budget overnight, and we cannot continue to have 6 and 7 hour meetings, because we get a little goofy after about 4. And trust me, the Kansas legislature has made a lot of mistakes by going into 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. So the intent is similarly, and I hate using cliches, they say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Okay.
I think my concern is we keep saying the word budget, and how does this fit into the budget? And that's not what this special meeting is about. Greg, can you clarify, are we supposed to be discussing budget and how the budget, I thought we were just looking at contracts. Now budget has been brought into it. And to my understanding, our financial officer nor Dr. Faust has brought a recommended budget for cuts or anything. So we're going at this blindly. And Greg, would you clarify about the budget?
And I will say, if I introduce the word budget, then I may have introduced that incorrectly. So
it was introduced prior to that, because it was mentioned that we are here to look at cuts, how it fits into our budget, how it may reduce areas. And again, These things have not been vetted out as of yet because it was not asked for our financial officer or Dr. Faust to present it to us yet. So Greg, would you clarify a little bit, please?
I mean, the meeting's scheduled to talk about administrative contracts, but as I understand what Dr. Nguyen is saying is that as part of that looking at the administrative contract, she wants to look at the costs to the extent those might play into the budget discussions down the road. So to the extent the focus is on the administrative contracts and those specific contracts and the costs associated with them, I think that would be within the purview of the special meeting.
Thank you.
So the motion is on the floor.
Excuse me. Susan, could you read the motion so that we can go ahead and vote, please?
Susan, you're on mute. Susan, you're on mute.
Sorry. That the Kansas City Board of Education continue discussion of administrative contracts today.
Are there any questions? It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions?
So the motion on the floor is yes or no to we will continue the conversation with contracts today.
Yes,
Did I follow that motion?
that's correct.
Correct.
Okay.
So would you go ahead and do the roll call and we'll vote?
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, no.
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Janie Humphreys,
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Valdine Nguyen,
Aldina Nguyen, yes.
Stacy Yeager.
Dr. Yeager, no.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
So, Madam President, if it is consistent to what we just voted, I entertain that I and others make a motion on each proposal, and we vote each up, after discussion, we vote it up or down.
Second.
Well, just to be clear so that I understand what you're trying to do, when you say you're voting a proposal up or down, I guess, can you explain to me what you're trying to do?
Sure.
So I'm just trying to make sure we do it right.
Okay, let me give you an example.
Yeah.
If I were to make a motion to say, I propose that we look at, I'll give you a real example. I propose that but this is not the motion, this is an example.
Right.
Look at insurance premiums and take certain action to change the insurance premium. Second, discussion, if we as a board in discussing the insurance premium as it is delivered in administrative contracts, and that passes, then it is my understanding that that is then a directive, a recommendation to administration as they continue to move forward in next year's contracts. That would be the provision.
Yeah, so this is where it gets a little tricky, and this is where this deadline pops into place that we've talked about. So if the insurance provision that you're wanting to change is in the current contract of the administrator, then you would have to non-renew that contract and offer a new contract with a different benefit. So,
Okay.
so the reason I'm saying, and that's why I want to make sure you're approaching it the way to effectuate what you want to accomplish, whatever it is you end up wanting to accomplish.
What the board wants to accomplish.
Yeah. No, I meant you as a group. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to mean you specifically.
But what is important is that you clarify that, because the environment and the intent is to look where there could be cost savings, but that while, yes, there will be changes, we are at the position legally to do just that. And this is, I really appreciated being open, because then the employee and the public are fully aware of our comments. So there will be no misunderstanding. The intent is to, because by law, if we were to change anything, it's my understanding, then we would have to close the door and open up a new door, but that you're in the same house.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to state it. That if the provision's in one of the contracts and you're wanting to change that provision, you've got to terminate, essentially, terminate's the wrong word, non-renew that contract, and then offer the employee a contract with the new provisions. And then it'd be up to the employee to take it or not.
Thank you.
This is Yolanda. I'm not sure if this is the right time or place. I'm gonna be very candid. So I understand the contracts. I understand we're on a timeline. What I don't know is all the ins and outs of, the budget. I have what I've received, but I'm new to the district's budget. As far as my position, I think contracts, yes, they should be talked about. I think we should be very open with what's happening with COVID-19. But I also think that if we are able to continue this school year with where we have been with our employees' budgets, with our employees' salaries and what they're receiving, I would hate at this short notice to make a change.
And this is Valdina Nguyen talking. No, you cannot, let's say, no offense for you being new at this.
That's why I said that.
And that's excellent. We what do they say? We don't know what we don't know. Contracts are in force until June 30th. We are looking, and it goes back to your first question. We are looking at contracts from July 1, 2020 to June 30th, 2021.
And just for a point of clarity on that, so that you understand where the May 15th deadline comes into play, is under Kansas law, if you have an employee who has a license, essentially, that's your administrators and your teachers, there's what's called the continuing contract law. So although everybody's under contract essentially through the end of this fiscal year, which is June 30, if the board's going to not renew that contract with that employee, they have to take action before May 15th.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that current contract automatically becomes a contract for the 2020-21 school year.
Okay, and I understand that. So okay. I guess where my vote yes to talk about contracts comes from is I agree that it should be a conversation. I believe that our community definitely is looking for us to have done our due diligence and to have had a conversation about what contracts should look like. But on the other side of that, I also agree that if our budgets allow, and that's where I am, again, newer there, if our budgets allow to continue to take care of our employees the way we have and renew their contracts as they were in the past, that's where I would be most happy with being able to do that. So yes, I understand it's one more year. I'm also working through COVID-19 in a lot of other places. So I do understand budget, just I have not touched this one.
And I guess my concern or question is when the conversation started off, it says no jobs would be impacted. As Greg just mentioned, if we vote something through, in fact, jobs will be impacted, meaning that the contract will be ended, terminated is the word he used, and a new one will have to be introduced. So it needs to be made very clear that today we could possibly end someone's contract if we agree to take action on each one that is presented. So it's possible that someone's contract would be terminated, and that is a fact.
But we need to be careful when we say that. We make the changes, we offer them a new contract. No one's losing their jobs. I know what he said, but no one is losing their job. Now that has been played upon by some people here, the hysteria, but neither there nor there. If we make changes, we offer a new contract. It is up to them to decide if they want to keep that or not. But no one, we didn't say we were setting out to fire them. In order to change it, we have to issue a new contract.
What's the,
Also, when you look at the statutes, the statute says usually this process begins in January.
Yeah.
And you notice too with faculty and usually we notice up in February. We could very easily start this process in January and we wouldn't be up against the wall. But that's where we are. Now, the process is by definition what it is, because when then you have a budget, when you have certain funds, but let's put it like this. If the state of Kansas gets $0, and that's the worst case scenario, the governor can make allotments. Greg, explain what an allotment is. And then what happens to school districts after they've already signed contracts.
Yeah, so what an allotment is essentially the legislature fixes the budget. And in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they've technically passed a budget right now and the legislature's out of session. They could go back in to approve an amendment to it, but I don't know if that's going to happen with the COVID thing going on. So right now there's a budget that's set by the legislature. And so the district knows what money it has been budgeted and is supposed to get from the state for next school year. And that's the money that you are working with to try to figure out what your budget is for next year. The problem, and that all works perfectly fine if all of the revenues come in that are anticipated by the legislature when they created the budget. The problem is, and this is what Mr. Covington has been talking about the last couple meetings, and if you get on and listen to some of the presentations by the governor or the KSDE, and they talk about this, is the state revenue projections are significantly lower than what they were at the time the budget was passed by the state legislature. And that revenue shortfall, and I don't remember the specific numbers, but it was over the 2-year period was roughly $1.1 billion or $3 billion or something like that. And we could look the specific numbers up, but that doesn't matter. What happens is if there's a shortfall in revenue, then a couple different things can happen. But what allotment is, that there has to be a balanced budget by the state. And so if the revenues are less than what they've projected to pay out, there have to be costs. So even though money has been budgeted to the school districts and you've been promised that you're going to get this money from the state, what can happen is as the year goes along, if the revenue doesn't come in, that you might get to April or May of next year, and you may not get the rest of the money that you've been essentially promised through the budgetary process through the state. And then the school district is left with money or with obligations that it's not getting revenue in for that are part of the budget process. And then at that point, you guys have to figure out how to either not spend or spend contingency reserves or something along those lines to cover those costs that you won't get from the state as part of that allotment process. It's essentially like somebody saying, I'm going to pay you $100, and they pay you 50 of it, and then they say, I'm broke, I can't pay you the rest of the $100, and you've just got to deal with it. So that's what allotment is, which is different than a reset of the budget. And it's hard because when you guys are doing the budget process, and Dennis will talk to you about this when you get into those budget meetings, you still have to budget and do your budget based upon what the projected revenues and the projected payments from the state are going to be. And you got to be thinking in the background about what might happen down the road, but you just don't know one way or the other what might happen in that regard.
And then please understand that what is complicating us is that we did not know the full extent of the cost of all the administrative contracts because we had not seen them. When I requested on behalf of the board, the data for the Excel sheet, it was only, and we got this, let's say the last 2 weeks, only at this time do we know the extent of our obligation. So we have not had full opportunity to have this discussion, have the knowledge. Here we are. Now we need to be mindful of our obligation.
So my question is, where else are we potentially reducing any people's pay? And
We haven't started with the proposals yet, Ms. Drew. So
we will have to make the decision about that at our budget discussion.
no, we have the obligation to make recommendations. If we started tomorrow for the next year, we are by law within our legal authority. So I can start with the first motion.
Actually, we still have a motion on the floor. This is discussion period.
Okay.
Second, Dennis, would you clarify, has there been an analysis of where we can cut funds besides salaries? As I'm passionate about staying true to our staff, and it is a realistic thing that we possibly do not have to touch or do anything with salaries for 2021. So Dennis, would you provide any insight? Have you guys already thought of looking at it in other perspectives? Or
Before he answers, can I ask Greg a question?
Well, let him answer first, and then
No, because it relates to this, whether this is pertinent or not. The issue that we voted on was to deal with administrative contracts. Provision is not to ask Mr. Covington, no disrespect about his view on this or that. This is the issue for tonight.
in order for us to
make, no. Once we list the thing, we voted up, we voted down. But this is the issue tonight. Mr. Goheen, help me. If I'm wrong, help me.
I think the issue and what's noticed up is the administrative contracts and taking a look at those. I mean, I think that whatever information is relevant to the board as part of that is part of the equation. I guess I want to ask Dr. Nguyen one question just to make sure I'm tracking. Are you wanting to vote up or vote down each proposal, or are you wanting to talk about each proposal and then have a combined? I'm still trying to figure out
I think there's more clarity to discuss each proposal and vote it up or down.
But how is that being fair?
No, hold on. Again, just trying to, from a procedural standpoint, to try and understand what we're doing. When you say vote up or vote down, you're talking about voting up or voting down to have that provision in a contract to be offered for next year, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so you still have the threshold issue ultimately as to whether or not you want to, whether you're going to want to non-renew. I mean, at some point before you get to that final spot, you're going to need to decide whether you want to do any of those changes for next year, which means non-renewing the contracts or not, aren't you? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out procedurally how we.
And thank you, because that is why you are our legal counsel. Thank you. Yes, you're correct.
Okay.
So how is that being fair to them when they're not doing, when we're not doing that to any other employees within the district?
Madam President, we are negotiating with the teachers and we're doing exactly the same thing. We are looking at this employee group tonight. We will need to look at our other employee groups with the same scrutiny, because that is our responsibility. And as we move forward in this manner, we're giving the administration clear direction so that when they come back to us, they know clearly what we as a board has agreed upon. So we're being very fair. And again, I appreciate the open discussion. And with many of the administrators sitting here, their faces looking at us, then that's very clear. They can hear us, they can see us, they can understand that we are all working, as you always say, together.
I think the problem comes in is that there should be ways that we can look at reducing our budget without salaries or without changing a salary, without changing benefits for the 2021 school year. That's what I think needs to be addressed, but we've not had that opportunity to address it.
And let me say, there are many in the community who feel that we are top heavy and that we could save some money by making some adjustments. It doesn't mean that we don't respect the work ethic and what people have done. They've done a marvelous job. But in most businesses, if we look around what's happening in our world right now, most companies from top to bottom are making adjustments.
And I think that our board doesn't really have enough information in order for us to be able to know what is necessary. And so I would really stress that we don't reduce anything right now, not in another group until we have been educated completely on what is necessary for us to do. We're just looking at small portions.
We voted. It was 5-2. And we need to go through this rather than haggling this back and forth. We could be here all night. That is not the intent. Let's look at each issue as was suggested.
We haven't voted
like
on it.
don't vote it up or vote it down. And we need to get started. And everybody has the right. If you don't agree with it, if the majority, then we'll just go down the line. But let's keep going. We could debate this all night. That's not what we're here for. You've expressed your viewpoint. Others have expressed theirs. Some haven't said anything. Let's look at the issue.
But you have to consider that these people have been working tirelessly to make sure that they get this.
And they have been paid respectively.
Let me finish. Let me finish. So when you present these provisions, let's take into consideration the work that they have been doing and try to make sure that we do it the right way. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, but I want to say that we do consider that people have worked hard and people all have a salary. Everybody who works for this district, I believe, have worked extremely hard. And then everybody has been paid. Now, some probably need more than others. That's just my opinion. But we need to quit going back and forth. Let's deal with the issue at hand so we can move on. I think we got each other's viewpoint.
Okay, Madam President, I'd like to.
Go ahead.
Okay, item number 1, excuse me.
Actually, there's a motion on the floor. Susan, aren't we in the middle of a motion?
No.
She's on mute. You're on mute, Susan.
Madam President, I think we passed the motion.
Yeah, we did.
I thought we had.
Okay, so
let's verify. Let's just verify it first. So
sure. Susan,
is there a motion on the? Susan, you need to unmute.
No, I don't believe that there is. I think that Dr. Nguyen was talking about making motions about each item that we discuss, but I don't think there's an actual motion on the floor right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Dr. Nguyen, would you give your first provision, please?
Thank you. This first motion is more of the process, and it will read, and Susan, I will ask that you ask for clarification if you make a mistake. No compensation package, salary, fringe benefits, etc., will be offered to any prospective employee without prior board approval. Excuse me, I move that no compensation package will be offered to any prospective employee without prior board approval. No prospective employee will be hired and no compensation will be paid without board having had a full review of package before being offered and approved, and signed contract must be presented to the board no later than 5 days after signature to be approved by the Board of Education.
So just as a point of clarification with that, I assume when you say all employees, you're not intending to include the employees who are part of the collective bargaining agreement, correct?
You are very correct, because tonight, the special meeting is just to,
Yeah,
but
it wasn't meant to be a gotcha question. I want the motion to read right. And then the other part of that is, when you say a contract, I assume you're not wanting to, and maybe you're not wanting to attend classified employees like the bus driver, stuff like that. You're wanting to include the administrators, right?
Thank you for clarification, Mr. Goheen, because it has to be clear.
Yeah.
All, so you would like to add no compensation package will be offered to any prospective administrative employee?
God, I think I want it to be what the board wants, but I want to make sure it's clear what it is.
Okay, so I stand corrected. Please, Susan, make that correction. So moving forward, anytime an employee is referenced, anything that we speak of tonight, strictly limited to administrative individuals as a group.
How does this proposal differ from our current? Oh, is it time? I'm sorry. Can I have discussion?
No, because we haven't had it.
That's the motion.
Yeah, second.
Second the motion.
Motion has been moved and seconded. Susan, would you read the motion again for clarification and then do the roll call? Are there any
Well, we
questions?
have discussion. You need to have discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any other persons have any discussion?
I would like to answer that, Yolanda. The fact that we are now just seeing many of the administrative contracts, that provision in the board policy was not followed, so that this is a restatement, a reiteration that moving forward, this will not happen again. Moving forward, we will not be caught May 1 not having seen contracts, and that's the answer. That this is a reiteration of what board policy. I think it's we can get the exact reference. Greg, you should have it near you, GACC or something, that contracts are not official until signed contracts are presented to the board and approved. This is a reiteration, a restatement.
Actually,
Okay.
nothing was done inappropriate previously. Let's set the record straight.
No, the record is straight that
I am speaking. I don't know what the problem is.
Excuse me, Dr. Yeager.
I'm talking. Thank you. And so it is very important also to understand that we have a designated contracts that we approve.
Right.
And the staple of it, the outline of it, the board approves. So previously what was done is the board approves the contracts, and as well as if you look in our board policies, we've approved the outline of the contract, we've approved the body of it. And so when something is offered, then that same staple contract is what is given and put out there. Also, contracts, if we need to look at them, open record, I mean, you know, for us to view as a board, all it is to simply request it. And they are posted specifically for us to see. If we want to specifically see them in advance and look at them in depth, again, it is not something that is hidden or was hidden from the board.
Exactly. And let me say that those contracts have been the same for the years, and they have been paying those benefits for at least 10 to 15 years.
So I just want to clarify that, you know, we had even an HR person come in, do an investigation if anything was wrong with our process, and she verified we are moving within our policies. So I'm not sure where this extra is coming from, but that's the facts.
That's
Yeah,
not true. We did not have an opportunity to see everything. I won't debate you because time is of essence. That is not true. And I'll leave it at that. It's not true. We did not see every contract. We did not see all the things that were offered. We saw some, but we did not see them all.
Greg, which policy gives us the outline on that? Because I want to make sure as we're voting today, if we're talking about policy versus contracts, and Dr. Wynn, know that I'm not doubting you. I'm just wanting to make sure that I'm not voting to change a policy at this point.
And that is, as I said, it's a reiteration, it's a restatement of policy.
Yeah.
Greg,
Okay.
the GACC.
And before we voted, we saw every contract and we approved the person's salary. So we knew of that information.
No, we did not.
And I wasn't here in the past, so I don't know what the disconnect is with
Correct.
the history in this conversation.
Okay,
This is Janie. Could I say something? Yes, when the HR report came through, we saw the salary, the starting date of the when they were going to start. But I have to say, I have never seen a contract until we asked for them to be posted on board docs. Now, I don't know if presidents or vice presidents have seen them. I have not before. So that is, and we have new members on the board too that are even newer than I am. So it's good that we all see the contracts and understand what they contain. There were a couple surprises on the spreadsheet that I did not know about. And I won't go into detail because in that point set, that gets too
much in the weeds.
In the weeds. But this seems to say, okay, we have a set contract. When we vote on it, let the board members look at it if they wish to, and then they know what's in the contract. Because we did have a problem with voting on 2 contracts to accept back in 2018, but those contracts were never signed. And we had employees working for almost 6 months without a contract. The board members did not know those contracts were not signed. We just assumed they were. So if this cleans everything up and makes it, straight on what we expect, I don't see a problem with it.
The intent of the motion is to clarify, reiterate, the board policy says this, it reinforces it, and it just makes it, hopefully guarantees that it will, that, board members, wherever they may be, whomever they may be, that the salary, the benefit package is presented to the board before it is paid out.
So Greg, the motion that's on the table right now, how does that compare to the policy? I'm sorry.
Well, it's sort of a mix of policy and procedure, just so we're all clear with it, which is perfectly fine. I just want to make sure we're talking about here. So the board policy that Dr. Wynn is referring to is GACC, and it talks about recruitment and hiring. By statute, all employees have to be approved by the board ultimately. And until they're approved by the board, they're not employees of the district. The contract is a little bit different because technically I can be an employee of the district without a contract. Again, I'll talk about like a bus driver or something like that. I offer to pay you, it's a set salary, and it's just governed by policies. So what happens in the GACC is the board's delegated recruiting authority to the superintendent or his designee to carry out the responsibility may involve other administrators. And essentially what that comports with, and I think it might be in your handbook, where he's responsible for making recommendations on hiring as well as on termination or non-renewal of employment as well. And again, that sort of bubbles up through the process. In terms of the hiring, what is supposed to happen, at least procedurally, and it's supposed to comport with this policy, is a recommendation to hire an employee is made. It usually shows up on your HR report. Again, that's not policy specific. That's just how the practice has been done so that it fits the policy.
Mhm.
So no one's hired until they come through and that HR report's approved. That HR report is supposed to include the salary and also other things like the position, stuff like that. Some of the stuff is also governed by board policies or schedules that are adopted by the board as a whole to sort of set ranges for what can be offered in that regard. An example is, I believe any payment for educational attainment is by board policy as part of that schedule. So there's a amount individuals who are hired as administrators get paid. I think it applies actually to anybody in the district, get paid for a PhD or a master's degree or things like that.
So Greg, how long has the contract been in existence?
I don't know, because this is the policy I'm just trying to talk about, and this is the procedure, not necessarily a contract.
Okay.
So then what happens is, separate from that, the board has historically had a form contract that is supposed to be approved at different levels for those employees. And the employee is given an offer letter that says, I'm offering you employment at this salary level with these benefits, and the employee signs that and returns it. That offer letter says it's supposed to say it's subject to approval by the board. And even if it doesn't say that, it's still subject to approval by the board.
Okay.
The board approves that as part of the hiring HR report, and the employee is then provided a contract to sign, and then the board president signs that contract after that. So that's how the process is supposed to work, and that contract is supposed to be in the form that the board has approved for those different levels. You don't want the employee signing the contract before it goes to the board, because then the employee can make an argument that he's had a contract offer. So it's procedural just in that sort of step, but that procedure sort of underlies what's going on here in the provision. As I understand with Dr. Wynn's motion, what she's wanting to make sure that no salary package is offered to those employees in the what I'm going to call the offer letter from a procedural standpoint until the board has okayed it. And then the contract after the board would approve it, which could still come through the hiring process, could still come through the HR report, I assume. But then she's wanting the contract, once it's signed, to be provided to the board after it's signed. Is that a fair assessment of what you're asking for, Dr. Wynn? Again, I want to make sure we're clear on what you want.
You broke up at the end. Consistent with what that policy says, until a signed contract is approved by the board, it is not official. The motion is to make that the case, because that was not the case with some administrative contracts. And that's, I think, the most way to say it to protect privacy.
Yeah, just the one flip, and I thought you said this in your motion, so I apologize for breaking up. Normally what happens is the board approves the hiring, then the employee is given the contract to sign, then the board president signs the contract. And then I thought you said you just wanted the contract to be provided back to the board after it was completely signed.
But within that, the board must approve the benefit package.
Right.
We were not provided the opportunity of oversight. Therefore, we did not approve the benefit package. We never saw the benefit package of a number of positions.
Well, you've got a couple different things there, just in fairness to everything. You know, part of the benefit package that you're talking about, the insurance benefit portion that applies to a number of them, I don't think is in the contract. I think that's part of the board policy in terms of the structure for the administrative contracts that I think has been in place since like the 90s. The other part of it is once you get to a certain level, there are additional insurance benefits that have been in the contract, and those are contractual provisions that have language to them in contracts, the form of which the board has seen for a number of years. Now, maybe they haven't seen the specific one signed by a specific employee, but they certainly have seen the form that would have included those contractual provisions in them from prior years.
To protect privacy, let's say that this includes items that may not have been in the, had not been a standard operating procedure, but that once we were provided the opportunity to review this last 2 weeks, those were items that were not, were brand new.
Mhm.
You know, we're tap dancing, but I believe you understand that the tap dance to protect privacy, this, the intent of the motion. Now, we can always put a footnote to where in board policy that is, that section, and where this is, but the intent is the board member, the board as a body will approve the packages, salary, fringe, whatever you're offering in a prospective administrative employee, everything.
But I guess the question I'm trying to make sure, and this is again for clarity so that somebody doesn't, if this passes, I just want to make sure that nobody interprets it. In the past, at least the
Isn't it all in the same contract?
well, in the past, the package, if you're what you're talking about, the insurance benefits, if they get a car allowance, those types of things, and I think those are the types of benefits you're talking about. Those have been in contracts of a certain level for a number of period of years. So I guess the question is the board wanting to individually approve a package for each administrative employee as they're hired, or is the board wanting to approve and view that before the offer is made of each individual offer made to any particular employee?
So Dr. Wayne, what do you think has changed in this process?
Well, first, let me answer that question. Yeah. The intent is to, again, moving forward.
Right.
As we proceed to hire new administrators, the entire package is presented to the board for approval.
And would that be before the offer is made to the employee? That's really what I'm trying to figure out.
You are making a recommendation to the board to employ X employee with this package.
But is that before the offer letter is sent, or is that
correct?
After? Okay.
Correct.
That's what I'm trying to understand.
Correct. That way, when the board then approves it, that offer is presented, that employee accepts, the employee signs the contract, it goes then to the board for that final stamp.
Well, you don't want the employee to sign the contract before the board approves it. You want it the other way around.
Okay.
Oh, could I ask a question? Because this could be a 6-week process to hire someone, because the board only meets every 2 weeks. So what I understand is that we find a candidate, we then bring the candidate to the board then approves whatever, then we take it back to the candidate, then we send them the offer letter, then we have to bring it back to the board for the contract. I'm trying to find the sequence, because then we could lose out on a candidate. Because what I was under the impression is that the travel, the mileage, the education, that's all standard, depending on what level you are in the organization for administrative. That has never changed to my understanding. And the board did know about those. But I'm wanting to know what is the process, because I have to think about it on the process, because I want the members to know that if it takes 6 weeks to hire someone, I think, or 4 weeks to hire someone, I think what you're saying, I get it, but we would lose a candidate.
And
if
then
we
too,
are,
don't we have to compare with market comparison and the benefits that we offer? Isn't that, when you look at the other school districts within our area, and since we're competing with them as well, and even within the nation, shouldn't there be a balance within somewhere?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question, Ms. Drew.
My question,
Do you want me to answer Dr. Faust's question first?
you can answer either one as long as you give a response.
Let me answer Dr. Faust's question. Dr. Faust, you already said certain things are in place. There's a salary schedule. There's they're going to get insurance. They're either yes or not going to get car allowance. We're right here. So there's not the possibility. Well, no, anything can happen. But no, there's no intent to draw anything out. That is the intent. Let's say the intent of the law. The intent, the spirit of the intent is that your board will have full knowledge of contract, package, incentives before you already know what you, if you find the good person, you draw it up. You know, we're Zooming, we email. So no, there should not be any worry about 6 months, a year. No, that's not going to happen.
But the reason why I ask is because we have to do it at a board session. I can't send it throughout the week. I would have to do this in a board session. So
And it
what
will
I'm saying
work.
is that we only meet twice a month. So that's what my question was, how does that work? What's the process? So if you want to see the contract, the form letter before, so we would do the interview. After the interview, then let's say we interview on a Friday, the board meeting's not until the next Tuesday. So we would wait a whole week.
No, you can expedite it by saying, here is a candidate, here's the paperwork, here's my offer letter, yay, nay.
No. Yeah, you'd have to have a board meeting.
Fine. Yeah. But you know what? This is, I would request that but then this is what we're sifting out the worms. But the intent of it is to move forward in a cooperative spirit. Those pieces of components that you are impressed by the person, maybe you even have to wait for a background check. So all those forces will come together. That's the spirit, so that any board, if it's all people different, there are no surprises, there are no contracts that after 10 months, no one has seen. So if there is a 2-week layover, I believe that's a little better than a 10-month layover.
But that's not the spirit in which the motion it was made. The motion, in looking at it, seems to be a bottleneck to the goal. Also, the superintendent, that's his responsibility to hire. And in our policies, it says the superintendent will hire and follow the process. Now, if the motion was to have the board review after, so that, you know, everything was in line, it was offered, the letter's written, it's already approved, now it's coming to the board for approval because the package is already put together, that's different than what you're saying. You're saying, I want him to go out, find people, make sure they're qualified and make an offer, just to possibly have him bring it to the board and the board says no, start the process again. So what is being, what the motion is not what's being said. I think that's the confusion going on. Yes. The motion is different than what is being said.
No, it's not. Because
and one of the things
we still have the right to disapprove. If you look on our handbook 37, negotiation 6A, it says we're supposed to approve all contracts.
Right, but
okay, but wait a minute, let me finish. We're supposed to approve them. This is saying that because somehow some things we didn't get to see, we didn't get to approve. And that's a problem. And that's why that's being brought up at this time.
So
So
when
does it really require a
because I've been waiting to speak. When you take out
go
the
ahead.
benefits and even the car allowance, and you're taking out the value of out of the employees' pockets. And we have to be clear that as a board, we're considering looking at our principals, our IC, directors, the cabinets, coordinators, everyone. And like I said, they have been working extremely hard. I understand that what you want to do, but there has to be a sense of professional trust in knowing that it's going to be done decent and in order, and then they will bring to us what is necessary. We as a board will vote and make that decision. But when you consider that we are trying to stay in comparison with the market value that's going on within the state and within our nation, and when we're trying to keep it in comparison with the other school districts, you have to offer them something.
Ms. Drew, no disrespect, but you keep saying it like we don't value, some of us don't value our employees. That's not fair.
I'm not saying that.
No, yes, you did. You did. Whether you realize it or not, we do respect them. We do value them. But at the same time, I keep hearing we're a board, but things are coming about that we don't know everything.
But you're not showing value.
No. We could debate that all night. I'm not here to do that. Because you said we know, we said we didn't. Some of us said we didn't. So that in itself shows there's a problem. So what we're trying to do is clear that up so that
That's why you wait until the budget when the information is being presented.
Not necessarily. I won't debate you on
meeting. That's when it's
we're not here for that. I'm not going to debate you on that.
Let me restate again. The intent of the motion is to just say the board will have all the information. You already said half of the data is form. And so that if at the end of the day, the board has all the information, it's a vote up, vote down. You say, offer to the guy, we accept what you offered, we accept what you offered to the woman, and it's a go.
So to clarify, when a principal needs to be hired, right? So say we have a principal that we need a position filled. We're telling Dr. Faust and Kelly that before we can offer a principal a position, before we can offer an assistant principal position, they need to bring that contract to the board, have us look through it and approve it during our board meeting, take it, because they can't sign the contract. So then take it back after we approve it as a board and say, okay, the board's approved it, 50 people. They looked through it, they approved it. We're doing them one by one. So now you can go back and make that offer to the principal. And then once that offer is made to the package, then it comes back again to the board for approval.
For clarity, I didn't think we were talking about principals. I thought we were dealing with the administrative contracts, that 16, 17 block.
Yeah, principals are administrators.
Yeah, principals, those are our administrators.
Well, if that's what we just said, we want to see the contracts.
Of every principal, of every ICO, I just want us to be clear.
I call for the question because we're going down a rabbit hole. The board policy says until it's signed by the prospective employee, it is not official.
Well,
so
let me just again, and this is I
clarify.
want to try to see if we make sure we're all square on what you're going to vote on, because I think there's been some confusion, and I want to kind of circle back to that, and we could probably have Susan read the motion, but before I do, I want to make sure I'm understanding. Dr. Nguyen, it's your motion, so I think the confusion may be arising out of whether you want the board to approve the offer on an individual basis before it's made to a candidate, or if you.
I'm sorry, Greg, I can't hear you.
Okay,
Can
you hear me now? Can other people hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. What did you say? Go.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me okay now, Dr. Nguyen?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So I think that what the confusion is coming over is, I think the question is, are you wanting the board to approve individual offers that are made to a prospective employee in an offer letter before that offer is made on an individual basis? Or are you only wanting to approve the actual contract package after the employee has accepted that proposal?
The motion is in response to what has happened in the last year.
I understand that.
And let me explain it.
Okay.
The board has not seen full benefit packages. To alleviate that, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Now, if you have 6 principals, 20 principals with the same provisions, you say, here's a package of 20 principals. They have this is a standard, that's a standard. And yes, you can get it done. But the policy says the board has the authority to approve contracts. And that, yes, the motion.
Nobody's questioning that. That's not what's being questioned.
But I'm saying, yes, that's the intent. That's the intent of that motion.
The intent of the motion is that before an individual offer is made to include packages or benefits, that proposal has to go to the board for approval before it's made.
Yes, because if there is something in there that is not standard, the board will never know it. But if everything's standard, it's standard. But if there's a provision that is not normally given to that administrative person or category, then it's a little bit difficult to, no, it's impossible to, actually it's impossible to hold anybody accountable if you didn't know it was there. But you want full transparency, yes.
Well, and the only thing I would say, and again, I understand the motion, it's clear, and I think that's good because I think people need to know what you're wanting and what the motion is. The only thing I would say is that, you know, these packages or these benefits have been sort of pre-approved by the board in terms of this is what we would accept for a deputy superintendent level or for a building principal level.
Okay.
That's what's in those salary schedules and those board policies that I was talking about earlier. Now, if they end up in an offer sheet and they're not supposed to be, and the person accepts the offer, then when you get the HR report, it should show what is included in that proposal. And I'm just articulating.
But it doesn't. That's the catch. It should, and so therefore, so that it will, I contend we make it a clear directive, then this won't happen anymore.
Okay.
Well, if we're going back to what's currently in our policy, is this really something that we vote on, or is it something that we've had conversation, we recognize it's in our policy, it fell through the cracks in the past, and it needs to be followed going forward? Maybe I'm overly simplifying this.
No, and that's the intent. It is a restatement of this will be the policy moving forward. Although I think Greg is going to make a point that there's a little different caveat. Correct, Greg?
I'm not sure it was, other than, I mean,
you just had that look.
You're really talking about it procedurally, how the board wants it to be handled as opposed to what the policy or the law says.
Well, will it be acceptable if we put the benefits in the HR report?
That's not the motion.
I'm just asking the question though.
That would be something that can be done without this policy. Yes,
well,
ma'am.
I call for the question.
No, I'm just asking your opinion about that.
It could be done without this motion, yes.
Well, I don't believe you have that answer, Dr. Yeager, but the motion is follow clearly the policies. You know, this is about the board approving a package.
Okay, but
prior knowledge and then everything. Excuse me?
We're still in discussion, so I'm asking you for your opinion.
Well, she called for the question.
If we decide to go ahead and add the benefits into the HR report. Do you think that would be a good way in which we could put that in there?
I'm not going to make an answer to that because the motion is an attempt to start being clean, clear, and so that when we are given hires, that everything that they are offered, the board members know, and that there's no room for any question.
I understand, but I thought maybe we could try to come to a mutual agreement.
Well, the question wasn't the question called. We need to vote so we can move on.
We were still in discussion though.
But in terms of, I don't know if we follow
Yeah,
Robert.
you don't strictly follow any particular rules of order, but typically when the question's called, that is the time to take the vote. It ends the discussion.
So my question is, I still don't understand the process, so I would need someone to explain the hiring process. I mean, if the board wants the compensation package, if it's transportation, insurance, no one ever asked for that because it's always in the board. It has been in the packages for some years. That hasn't changed. If you're at the cabinet level, it's a certain thing. If you're executive director, it's different. If you're at the director level, it's different there. But they all, whatever the category is, it's the same at that level. But if you're wanting it spelled out in the HR report, then that's just another line or another column that's added for that. As far as, I'm still trying to figure out how to, because if this is the process that you're wanting, we need to know how to make sure, because we do have openings, not at the cabinet level, but we have openings that will come forth. I need to know, what do we need to do so that we don't get, so that it's not a gotcha and say, oh, well, you didn't follow this process, because I don't understand what the process is at this point.
The motion said, when one draws up a package, item 1, 2, 3, 4, listed, presented to the board, when you leave that board approval, there is nothing else thrown into the package. Now that may be simplifying it, but that's the extent of it. It's not complicated. It's not trying to gotcha nobody. It's just so that everything is up front. When Joe Henry is hired, the board knows when they said, yes, hire Joe Henry, they know everything Joe Henry is to receive.
So technically, Joe Henry, if we'll go with that, is coming to the board 2 times.
Is that what you're saying?
I don't want to speak for Dr. Wynn, but what I'm understanding is that before an offer is made to Joe Henry, that compensation package, which is what goes in the offer letter to him, would be presented to the board and approved by the board before it's presented to Joe Henry.
Mm-hmm.
If Joe Henry accepts it and signs it, then it comes back for board approval to hire him, at which point he signs the contract. And then I thought the last part of the motion, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Wynn, was that once the contract is signed, it comes back so the board sees it.
It comes back to the board and it goes on the shelf.
So
Yeah.
that's 3 times that the board is touching.
No, twice.
And so what's the process? And you said Dr. Faustus could lengthen it by 6 weeks for us to possibly fill assistant principal or principal position.
I called for the question.
Yes.
I'm sorry. May I ask a question? This is Randy. I'm going to play the new card like Yolanda as well, just so I understand the process and try to get clarity on the motion. When positions are put out there, right? So there are standards in terms of what a position can be offered. The board's already approved those standards in terms of compensation, car allowance, or whatever that may look like. There are standard contracts out there for those positions are those posted with the position so that folks know what they're signing up for? because I wonder if the board's already agreed on what the package looks like for each level of administration, if we just need to know if there's anything extra that comes in or that's proposed for that potential candidate. So as long as Joe, whoever, signs that the board had already previously approved the compensation package for, then it doesn't necessarily need to come to the board. Only if Joe Henry asks for a Lamborghini, and then that would have to come in front of the board to say, hey, he's asking for this extra, which isn't board approved. Is that, am I understanding or oversimplifying, or am I just way?
You're understanding, because if then we see the Lamborghini parked out there and we end up paying for it, then because we did not know about the Lamborghini, we're responsible for it. So, you know, I believe, again, the spirit of the motion is to be fully transparent. And I believe there was only 2 times the person is brought to the board. And it does not, on its face, present a problem. If practically, let's say, Joe Henry is courted by 15 different schools, and we just missed that fish. That's the point, I guess, you're trying to say. But transparency is what is the intent.
Dr.
It didn't
Fausto,
happen that way. So, you know, that's.
So I have one other question. How does it work for superintendent appointment?
Please explain what your question is.
So the policy states that there's superintendent appointment. So there could be an employee who is already employed in the district, and they can be appointed to a position.
The superintendent's got the authority to transfer or assign any employee within the district to a position for which they have a license or anything along those lines. And if that transfer is made, they would still be under the same employment terms that they would be prior to the transfer. If there were going to be any adjustment to the transfer in terms of like an increase in compensation, then that typically goes back through the board as part of the hiring, or not as part of the HR report. So say
salary adjustments.
Yeah, if there's a salary adjustment, then that would come back in as part of the HR packet. At least that's how it's done right now.
Right. So that answers your question. There's not a problem. And let's.
You're muted.
We lost you, Dr. Williams.
Right. Let's go back to Lamborghini. When that Lamborghini is provided and the board didn't know about it, that's the problem.
But the problem also is that the Lamborghini won't be provided because HR will stay within the realm. So therefore, that what is in the package would be brought to the board. The board would have to approve it. Then it would have to go back. So this is with the teacher shortage.
But we have had some problems.
But we're not taking into consideration the havoc this is going to reap if this is passed on HR.
No.
Understand why we're not taking in consideration what the current policy is and going on. I mean, we have the policy, we know what the policy is. If it hasn't been followed in the past, then we as a board need to address it. That was before my time, why it wasn't, and Dr. Wynn said the same thing. I mean, my vote is to not change anything, to reinforce the policy that we have in front of us if that has not been done. Unless I am completely oblivious to what's going on. We've spent an hour talking about this.
Exactly. And that is what the motion was. If it's already to be listed, then list it. It's just saying in transparency, bring it to the board, get stamp of approval, offer that job to make sure you list everything, offer the job to the person. When the person signs it, bring it back to the board and they're hired.
But is that outlined? So Dr. Faust, is that how you understood the policy to be? Okay, then that's different. Wouldn't that go back into policies versus contracts?
It's I started out saying it's a procedural question.
Right.
So-
What Dr. Wynn's motion did, the policy is not being changed per se. Dr. Wynn's motion is changing the procedure and requiring the offer package to be presented to the board before it's presented to the candidate. And also requiring that the contract come back to the board so the board sees the fully signed contract. That's what I understand, at least.
Currently, what is our procedure? Do we have a procedure that is outlined that is very clear to our superintendent?
The
Outside
current,
of our-
the current procedure, as I understand how it's supposed to happen, and I'm not advocating for whether it's happened exactly this way or not, but what I understand it's supposed to be is the board has approved contract forms for the different levels of employment within the school district. And as part of that process, the board has also approved benefits at different levels for employees in the district, and employees meaning administrative employees. So, and that includes things like if you got a PhD, you get this amount of money. If you're at this level, you get this insurance. If you're at this level, you get a phone, whatever that might be, right?
Okay.
And the offer package made to that employee or that prospective employee should not be anything beyond what the board has authorized for that level of employee.
Okay.
And so then the employee would sign that employment offer if they accept it, and it comes, and then on the HR report would just come to the board. The HR report typically does not attach the offer letters, it just has the line item.
Yep.
The board approves the HR report, which approves the hiring of the individual, subject to the individual signing the contract, which is the form contract the board's supposed to have approved. And then that contract is subsequently signed by the president based upon the approval of the hiring. And what I understand Dr. Wynn's concern is, and she'll correct me if I'm wrong, is her concern is that those offers have included benefits or things that were not pre-approved by the board for that level. And so when the contract is later signed, it may have something that surprises the board. I think I'm correctly assessing that, right, Dr. Wynn?
And I'd just like to say, I'm not aware of when we haven't followed any of our standards already. So I think we're doing everything accordingly. But if we need to make any changes, we can go ahead and vote on it.
That was a question I was going to ask, Greg, just for clarity. You said the contract should come back to the board with whatever the board had previously approved with nothing extra.
I think
give the superintendent the authority to add anything to the offer letter prior to, or is that out of his purview, his or her purview?
The only range in terms of what the superintendent's negotiation in terms of the offer is that I believe, and again, it's been a while since I've looked at like the schedules, I believe there's a range of salary for the different positions. And so it's not like it's, you know, every position has this salary and that's it, because it could depend upon the level of experience of the candidate, things like that. So I believe there's a range, although I haven't looked at the salary schedule in a while.
Right, but outside of the salary, like the other benefits, compensation, the superintendent, regardless of who it is, does not have the authority to add or change that as currently stated in our policy or process, whatever that's like. The superintendent.
That's correct. And if the offer is made that exceeds what that policy is, then that should not be approved.
Right, like exceeding the salary schedule, or perhaps a relocation stipend is not given to that category of employee. So all we're saying that if it exceeds those salary ranges, those come before they are sanctioned.
Well, that's a little bit different than the current motion, though. I mean, the current motion is to bring everything.
Correct, but that's where the kicker is that if it's standard, it's standard. But then if for some reason it exceeds, that is the only place where the board would see the different provision, is it not?
Well, that's not the motion that I understand.
No, I'm asking. I mean, we've taken that motion and we've turned it and ripped it and turned it again. Now I'm just saying the scenario If there is
You-
that
you- you-
Lamborghini,
Well, I think this might answer your question.
Mhm.
Say you had a candidate that the superintendent liked and the candidate got the offer letter with the standard package and said, I would come to work for you guys, but I need $5,000 more, or I'm just making up a number, right?
That's
Or
correct.
I need XYZ that's not standard package. Then before that offer could be made or agreed to, that should be approved by the board before it's made. I would agree with that.
and that's the spirit of the motion.
So Dr. Nguyen, would you, just a question here, this is Randy, would you be willing to maybe amend that motion to?
I'm sorry, are you talking to me?
Yes, Dr. Nguyen, I'm sorry. Would you be willing to amend your motion, or I think it was you that made the motion,
Correct.
to state only those contracts outside of the previously approved compensation packages need to come to the board for approval? I guess it's more of a process piece, rather than have them all come, as long as they're within the pre-approved compensation package. Would you be willing to just say, hey, superintendent, if you're adding a Lamborghini, that needs to come to the board first before it's approved, rather than bring all of the contracts forward?
Only on the condition that the board fully is aware of all of the categories so that there are no surprises. And the answer is yes. As long as they are, I mean, it's like a check off. This, and this goes to this. And you are clearly within the guidelines that are stated, that you're not going to be totally off of the salary schedule, and you're not going to be, but the answer is yes.
You know, if I could make a suggestion, and this is not the current motion, and obviously eventually vote on whatever motion you guys want to do, but one suggestion that I might make to avoid any confusion in the future at all is that on an annual basis, the board review the form contracts for all administrators, as well as the benefit packages and salary ranges for all administrators, not the ones currently on staff, but the ones going prospectively, so that if you did that like in February or January, then you would know in advance what everybody would be on the same page, and there'd be no confusion about any departure from the language or anything like that. But that's not the motion. I just was making that as a suggestion down the road. That might be a good way to do it.
The maker of the motion, and we'd have to ask the second if they would be willing to amend it to include, because again, the issue is, and then now you're opening up for more discussion, but the issue is nothing out of this discussion tonight looks at, on this one, past practice. Although past practice is the reason that I brought the motion. So if you want to add, where would the, well, it would be adding that in January, the list is reviewed. Would that answer your concern, Randy?
But I think the problem is
The question is to Randy, please.
Could you repeat that? Adding the which part, the review in January?
Correct. Then everybody would know what the standard forms include.
Right, and then also, and only bringing those that are outside of the
correct,
not all of the contracts, because
correct.
Okay, I think that.
And what I would suggest with that is that you, as a board, you put that on your board calendar, that item that's reviewed every pick. I was arbitrary about January, but pick a meeting and just have it on your permanent calendar that you're going to review them on that meeting, so that every year you review it and there's no question about what your contracts are that you're offering out that year.
Well, something like January is what we need to do, because in our handbook, it says what we need to be doing in terms of budget in January. So we're not here Because we
Yes.
put it off and put it off and put it off. January, we do need to keep January in.
Yeah, and it may be, and I don't want to drag the conversation on. The only reason I was hesitant about January is you want to make sure that's done enough ahead of the hiring season so that when they're out recruiting for a position, they've got the contract and the benefit package. They know what it is when they're out recruiting. So if that's December, I don't know when the hiring season starts, but January, December, whatever it might be, that should be far enough out that you've reviewed it on an annual basis. Every board member is present, knows what the standard contract looks like, knows what the standard benefit package is for each level, and it should be transparent at that point. And I think that might alleviate the problem long term in terms of what you're trying to look at, because then if you get something that's outside the box that comes back, well, you got a clear violation of a board policy, and nobody can sit there and say I didn't understand or didn't know, because it's clearly been done on each year. And maybe it should be January, because I know you got the election and you got new board members coming on in January, but I hesitate on that only because if it's January, that might be too late to start having offers out. You might want that in. So, but that's just my.
Okay, so
That's just my food for thought.
could we get the clear directive as far as what we're going to be voting on to make sure everyone is clear for the last time so that we can vote?
Are you asking me? Because I'm not real sure. I'll tell you what I have, but I'm not really sure.
We have talked around quite a bit.
Susan, what happened to you?
I'm lost. Let me read what I wrote down as the original motion and the addition, and then I'm not quite sure this is what you've ended up wanting. But the motion that I have is that no compensation package will be offered to any prospective administrative employee without prior board approval. No administrator will be hired, and no employee will be paid without the board's approval. No prospective administrator will be offered a contract without the board's approval at least 5 days in advance. Standard contract forms will be brought to the board by January of each year.
I don't think that's what was agreed on. Randy's motion was only if it's outside of the standard contracts that have been approved shall blah, blah, blah happen.
Well, Randy didn't have a motion. He asked if the maker of the motion.
He asked for it to be added to the motion.
But the understanding is that contracts come anyway for approval. If there's something that falls out of the standard, then that additional visit is made. But just as we've been talking for the last however time, if it fits all the standard categories and we may have to do another check off, it's presented on the HR report with the knowledge that everything is standard unless something is outside the norm.
I know we've had a ton of debate and a lot of discussion on this thing. I think we maybe sort of have softly got to a spot, but I'm a little worried that the motion as currently crafted might be confusing.
Yes.
Yeah. Would we want, without inviting further discussion, would we want Dr. Nguyen and Ms. Page, would you want to withdraw the current motion and restate the motion maybe without further discussion from everybody so we can move on, but so that we have a clean motion in front of everyone that they know what they're voting on?
Sure. I move that essentially, now it may not be, don't take the essential word out, but full transparency. Now, you word it any way you want, Greg, right now, because we'll wordsmith it later. But
Okay.
The intent is the board is fully aware of all contract provisions, compensation package provisions.
Good.
That if there's anything outside of the standard, then it will take a separate lap in front of the board for approval. Now, isn't that what we finally beat it down to?
I think so, with the addition of a annual review of the package and the contract.
Correct.
In January, right?
Correct.
Is January the date of the month everybody wants?
Let's use it.
Okay. So let me try to restate your motion. You tell me if I got it right or wrong, okay? I believe the motion would be that the board will review annually every January at its first meeting the forms for all administrative contracts, as well as any benefit package to be offered with those contracts at that January meeting. For any departures in terms of requests for compensation to include benefits for any administrator offered a position beyond that would have to have prior board approval, and that all contracts would still come to the board for formal approval through the HR report with any additional items that the board sets forth at that January meeting to be included in the HR report. Is that close enough?
So moved, but
I need it seconded.
wait a minute.
Oh, she has a
But the problem is, as long as you captured that it has to, the signed contract, according to that GACC, is followed.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I left out the last part. So the last part would be, and that the full signed contract would be provided back to the board after it's signed for review.
And that is not new. That's just to make sure that policy is adhered to.
I apologize. I left that out inadvertently. My fault.
So moved.
I think it was moved and seconded.
Yeah, I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Susan, would you do a roll call vote, please?
I will. Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Janie Humphreys,
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy Lopez, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Valdine Nguyen,
Valdine Nguyen, yes.
and Stacy Yeager.
Okay.
Stacy, yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Dr. Nguyen, you had another one?
Yes. Don't worry, I haven't lost myself. Take that out. Don't do it. Okay. Remove this relocation stipend. Okay, not the insurance coverage. Huh? Okay. All right, where are you? There you are. Okay. I move to, let me find it. I move to remove relocation stipends for 1 year.
Second.
Did you hear me?
Yeah, I think there was a motion and a second. You moved to remove relocation stipends for 1 year, correct?
Correct. And the logic behind, oh, excuse me.
And I think there was a second. I think.
Yeah,
I think
second.
I didn't hear who.
I seconded.
Okay,
Wanda Brownlee
you
Page.
moved and seconded. Are we're ready for discussion?
Correct.
What if we, this is Janie talking, Valdinia.
Okay.
What if we said no, relocation stipends will be paid out until it's reviewed in January? Would that be acceptable?
I would accept that amendment. With the second?
Second.
I have a question.
Can you say it one more time? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. No relocation stipend paid out. Say that one, I'm sorry. go ahead.
No relocation stipends will be paid out between now and the review of compensation packages in January of 2021.
Gotcha.
I have a question. What's the rationale for that?
That's what I was asking.
I don't see a rationale for, if we're moving a great candidate up here for some reason, what's the rationale for taking away moving expenses?
The rationale is that the salary schedule is adequate enough to, in the most places, to take care of that. I mean, keep in mind, we are not speaking about superintendent at all during this conversation. It does not deal with anything but superintendent. And that in the attempt to protect privacy, if any times it may be given and it wasn't approved, we will just put it on, we will put it on hold until January.
I think this may be a got you kind of a thing. I'm not comfortable with it, just for the simple fact of, if someone needs relocation expenses, irregardless of their salary, and that's part of the package we're offering, I don't see that as a big financial expense that we could not, that would impact our budget in a huge manner. So I again do not understand the rationale, and I'm not sure why was the superintendent brought up. I'm not sure. That's not the contracts we're
Exactly. I wanted to reassure you and to reassure everyone that that was not what we're discussing.
But I'm curious as to why the superintendent was used as an example when.
That's what Dr. Yeager, I said. I wanted to reassure everybody that that we were, none of this discussion included anything. So there was, that's my explanation, just so that you would be assured.
So have you received a market study in relation to how this offer is being made? Have you looked at a market study in relation to that?
Yes, I have. There's a lot of market studies, and as far as coming to Wyandotte County,
for relocating,
to the Midwest, there's not a large relocation cost coming to the Midwest. And again, remember, we're in a COVID-19 environment. This is just a motion to reevaluate our relocation stipend. And again,
you can present, you said you've seen one, could you present that to the board so that we can know of it?
If this passes, I'd be happy to. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So are there any other comments for discussion?
I would just like to say that putting it on hold until January, make sure that everyone understands which positions get relocation assistance, and makes it more equitable for all hirees. Because if we're paying relocation expense for someone to come from Colorado, New Mexico, I don't know where, but they're getting the same salary as someone who is here local, and we're not paying them that, then that affects the equity of the reimbursement. Just that way in January, we can sit down, we can all talk, we can all bring all of our information and come to an agreement for next year's.
So Janie, if we were to hire someone today, well, next month, are we paying their relocation fee?
I would say no, we were suspending it until January. Hires between now and January would not get relocation fees.
Okay.
And I think my concern with that is that currently we are marketing for positions, trying to get people, this is a very competitive time. Now, if it was, okay, and then we look at it in January and not going forward, I think that we don't want to lose our competitive advantage. And because if there's an offer currently on the table looking for our principals or our vice principals, or we know that there's a shortage, you know, of people in the area for principals, and we know that we have positions open. I'm just concerned that that would put us in a disadvantage.
I actually agree with Stacy. If you have a very highly qualified candidate, you don't want to lose that person. And so in the grand scheme of things, we may look at Dr. Faust and say, hey, you already know what we look like financially. So we may need a little bit of figuring this part out. But I do agree, we don't want to lose great candidates because of moving expenses.
Do we have a relocation policy that can be shared with the board so that we don't get any surprises?
That's fair.
Because I did not realize that we were paying relocation fees for principals and some other positions. And it would be very helpful to know that and reassess in January.
I agree. I think maybe we can have that provided when we look at the schedule, or in advance, you know.
I agree.
Greg, did you answer that question? Do we have a policy for relocation of principals?
I'll be honest, I don't know what level you have. I know you've got a relocation. I'm calling it a policy loosely, but there was a approved, at least at one point in time, a relocation for certain employees, but I don't know what that number is or where it's at. I mean, ultimately do what you want to do, but if you want a simple solution to this, if you're looking at it in January, I think that makes sense. And what Dr. Faust could do is if they have a candidate that they're interviewing who is beyond the geographic area of the state of Kansas or whatever it is, and relocation is part of the deal, this would be one of those items that would be temporarily above the authority to just grant without getting board pre-approval. So, and you could do that by, I mean, you wouldn't have to wait till January to do that. You could still do that as a board item, you know, at the next regular meeting, even if you wanted to, where you said, we would agree to allow or permit a relocation fee of up to X dollars if needed to get a candidate from outside the states, and then have that be the holding place for the year until January, until you have a more firm discussion about it. But that's just my 2 cents. That's not really, you know, legal advice. I can't remember who answered me the question. I believe there's a policy. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it says in terms of amount.
So Dr. Wing, would you be open to the possibility of looking at it in January?
Sure, but you know what the case is that we're paying a lot of, I mean, let's see what the total, I don't have the total right here, but again, the spirit of these motions is that where can we find savings, cost savings for the next year? Now, paying $2,500 to relocate a principal, when I don't believe we've had the relocation stipend. So we're just saying, here is the savings. Again, voted up or down. I will support freezing the relocation stipend because, again, at the end of the day, there's been a lot of fringe benefits paid that were not on this standard form. So as you think about it, and as we proceed, we've got to cut costs someplace, people. And these are small sacrifices. These are I haven't said anything about salaries. These are small sacrifices, and if we're not willing to make small sacrifices, we may be shooting ourselves in the foot. But that's just the editorial of the motion is, and I'll call my own question. The motion is to suspend no relocation.
And can I know you just said that, but I wanted to say, we have a lot of people in our system who have gotten degrees and did things, they live here, that we not forget about them. I'm not saying that the people we brought in have not been the best, but I'd like to also see us look at who's here. And it's kind of discouraging when you see people get their degrees, they do everything we tell them they need to do, and we haven't really focused on them and training our own and giving them an opportunity. Let's not forget about them.
Can I offer a question? To that, I did look at those individuals. I did interview people from here. Actually had some long conversations, and people chose not to take the position for here nor there. I don't go into why they chose not to, but I did do that. It wasn't that it was automatically that we looked outside. We were looking for the most effective person to fill a position. And there were candidates that were from in here that from Wyandotte County that we did look at. And they just chose to do something else other than that. So it wasn't that we don't, and we do want to give everyone an opportunity. And I don't want to get in, I know this is not the motion or the question, but I don't want anyone to walk away thinking that we don't want people from Wyandotte County employed in an executive position.
Right.
Principal, that's not what we want to be communicated, because that is what we are looking for, is individuals who are here. But we can't force someone to do well on an interview or not do well on an interview, or someone who does great on an interview and they choose not to take the position. That's all I want to say to that. But I agree. I agree. We do want to offer positions. And I've shared with our cabinet that these open positions, we need to look inside. And so now, if you look at our administrators, we have an administrative training group for people, because we have to what we call build the bench. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're trying to do. But we've got to make sure that people are in there and they don't fail when they get in there.
Okay, and just for reference.
And excuse me, I want to respond to that. Thank you for saying that, because that's important. People need to hear that. But I didn't want to keep hearing, well, when we go outside, well, what about the people here? And again, I thank you, Dr. Faust, for saying that, because people need to hear that. But we need to make sure we don't forget. We got to open up for everybody, give everybody an opportunity.
And one thing I want to add.
This is not the place for this discussion, although we're going to have to continue to inform you, Dr. Faust, that there's still people waiting on the pending. There's still pendings, that there are PhDs in special ed who never get interviews, and especially special ed, we have shortage, and you don't hire PhDs in special ed with experience. So
let me say one thing. One of the things that I did learn when I went to the workshop in Washington, D.C. is shortage of teachers is not just in the state of Kansas, it's throughout the nation. And there are within the school districts across our United States, people are not going into teaching. So that is an area that we may have to look at as far as hiring outside of the state of Kansas. Yes, there may be some here locally, but we have to expand. I just wanted to point that out.
So I want to just clarify, we don't have anyone pending in HR. Again, if a person if they're credentialed and the principal in that position, if they are looking at them, there are other, and this is a personnel issue, we would just have to talk about some of those people that are talked about. There are specifics that go behind some of that. So it's not that no one wants to hire. There is a certified, credentialed employee that is in special ed. No one is turning that person around. So when they're saying they're not getting hired here, everyone. So then I'm like, okay, so did you not get hired in Turner? Did you not get hired in Edwards? All these others. So those are my questions, but there are reasons, and we can, of course, talk offline about those reasons about that.
And we will have to, because this is not the first time I've said
Right.
this.
I know.
So, and I'm gonna keep it up, because it's not the only situation. So, but let me let's call for that question.
Actually, I think it's important to note that Dr. Faust sent out a report stating that there were no more pending ones. Kelly in HR asked for us to send examples of who was pending and if we had questionable people. Unfortunately, she did not get any responses except for me and maybe one other person. So I think it's very unfortunate that we keep pulling this as a card. That is not true. Again, in Dr. Faust's tidbits, he clearly showed how many was in pending status and gave us that update. It's important that we read what Dr. Faust sends up in the follow-up.
Okay, the question, can we move on?
The motion was made. Susan?
What is the motion?
He's coming. Give her a
The
moment.
motion is, that I have is that the board approves suspending paying relocation stipends until the benefit package review in January 2021.
And I'd like to add, to make the amendment to the motion, that we get the information Dr. Wynn was going to provide.
Sure. Call for the question.
Question, let's go on.
Okay. Susan, would you do the roll call vote?
Okay. Yes. Maxine Drew.
Maxine Drew, no.
Yolanda Clark.
Yolanda Clark, no.
Janie Humphreys.
Janie Humphreys, yes.
Randy Lopez.
Randy Lopez, no.
Wanda Brownlee Page.
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Valerie Nguyen.
Dr. Wynn, yes.
Stacy Yeager.
Dr. Yeager, no.
Motion fails.
Thank you. The next one, please.
Sure. I move that educational stipends are paid only one time upon achievement, not ongoing, and that the rates for all educational advancements are equalized throughout the system.
Please clarify.
Excuse me?
Second.
Could you please give some clarity to make sure that everyone understands?
Educational stipends are paid only once upon attainment, not annually, because I believe faculty receive educational stipends when they achieve the degree, higher degree, additional hours. They don't get it every year repeating.
Just for point of clarification, when you say faculty, I assume you mean the teachers? Is that right?
Okay, now help me understand what a teacher is not a faculty and a faculty is not a teacher.
Teacher would be faculty. I'm just trying to make sure I understand what group of employees you're talking about. The difference between the stipend that's paid to the folks that are not on the negotiated agreement and the folks that are on the negotiated agreement is the folks in the negotiated agreement, which are your teachers primarily. That has to be negotiated as to what they pay, and they get column movement on the schedule to account for educational attainment. So, you know, for every 30 hours of college credit you get, basically you move over one column.
Correct, and you know, Greg, I know what you're speaking of.
But I'm not sure the others do.
Oh, okay, good. But
right.
the
I'm
key
trying to make sure everybody understands
that it's only one time. That's the key.
Well, it is, except that they get paid now on that new column. So it's a one-time movement.
Okay.
But then each year you go up an amount if it depending on what the negotiations are that year. So
okay,
you're right. You don't get, like, we don't pay the teachers, I don't know what it is, $2,000 for a master's degree every year. They just move over to the master's column from the non-master's column, and then they continue to move down the schedule on that level.
Well, I think the question is in regard to if you have a PhD, and I'm not talking about the teachers. If you're an administrator with a PhD, don't they get a stipend every year?
Correct. That's my understanding. Now, again, I just want to make sure we're all clear on what we're talking about.
We're not talking about the teachers in the faculty per se.
Right.
The issue was because they only get there, like, for example, I came in with a master's in 30 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I got an additional 15 hours. I got another stipend for that.
No, you didn't get a stipend.
I moved up to another pay scale.
Correct.
Got an increase. But in the case of PhDs, correct me if I'm wrong, don't they get it every year?
Yeah, but if in effect you get the move on the teacher's column, you get it every year too, because you've moved over the column. So every year your salary is increased by that amount of that column.
Yeah, I know that for teachers, but I'm saying if I were an administrator,
yes,
I have a doctorate degree. Correct me if I'm wrong and tell me if I'm wrong. If it's not true, I apologize. But don't they get something every year?
Yeah, I don't remember what the number. I don't remember what the number is. And to be clear, so everybody, again, the benefit of those who haven't looked at the teacher's contract, there is a column for PhD on the teacher's column too.
Okay.
And so, but for non-teachers, administrators,
okay,
they have, and this is in your administrative schedule. I think it's one of the attachments. It's not, and I don't remember what the specific numbers are. So forgive me on that. But
$3,700 in some
for PhD, is that right?
Correct.
So
yeah, $3,756.
you get $3,700 if you have a PhD and you're an administrator, and you get some other amount if you have a master's degree, don't you?
Mm-hmm. You do.
And that is a payment. This is the way it works right now. Right now, my understanding is they get that every year. They don't get an additional amount, but they do get that amount every year. So the motion, as I understand it, would be to change that to say you get it the year you get the degree or you get the additional educational attainment, but you don't continue to get it each year past that.
So Greg, would you clarify, is that in essence for those who are currently getting it and in their contract that they get a yearly, would that be considered changing their contract?
No, this provision is by board policy, as I understand. I don't think, I looked at the contracts. I don't think any of the contracts have a specific provision for educational attainment in them. This is if you're hired on, as I understand it, and you have the degree or you attain the degree while you're working for the school district, that additional education adds that amount to your salary each year.
Okay, and then to clarify, this would be a change in policy. Is that correct? That if we change it from annually, it would be a change in our policy. Therefore, would it have 3 reads?
Well, that's your normal process. I mean, the board obviously has the ability to depart from that by a vote if you wanted to do that. But what you're effectively doing is you would be changing the board policy as it relates to how the educational stipend, if you want to call it that, for administrators is paid. So if you, as I understand what Dr. Nguyen's motion is, going forward, you would only get that in the year you attain that educational attainment. So the year you get your master's degree, you get that payment, but you wouldn't get it in subsequent years. The year you get it, you get it in that year, but not in subsequent years.
So this could possibly decrease the salaries of current employees who have been getting the stipends yearly. Is that correct?
That's correct. They would not get the stipend in future years if they've already received it, as I understand the proposal.
This is Janie talking. I think on one of those spreadsheets it was showing the differences in different school districts, how they pay, whether they have stipends or whether it's built into their salary schedule. So is this something that we want to address in January when we look at the salary packages and the fringe benefits, so that we can make sure that we address it in a thoughtful manner and not rush. That's my suggestion.
As long as the seconder would agree, the, again, intent of our analysis is that, and not to pick on Yolanda and Randy, but that we don't know a lot also that is being provided. And only with this spreadsheet do we see the I'll call the fringe benefit package that is distributed. And it's not, there's a little challenge, and again, the answer is yes, but there's a little challenge with different employee groups when there's such stark extremes. Because while, and Greg, you know, I know salary schedule, 46 years of salary schedule, but that when you do move to that final terminal degree, you're locked. And if there's no more steps and there's no more room to move, it's not, the equity is not there. So the intent of the motion was that this reoccurring annual educational attainment combined with very high salaries widens that gap and just makes an educational system difficult to provide cohesiveness many times. That as your different employee groups see that gap widened, at one point it would be wise, in my opinion, for us to continue to consider a little bit more equity in these bonuses. So I can either withdraw the motion or amend the motion, as long as people are clear.
This is Yolanda. When are those paid? Are they paid in one lump sum, or are they paid throughout all 24 pay periods or whatever?
Lump sum.
One lump sum. So have they already been paid this year?
They're paid throughout.
You're paid throughout the year.
They
Okay.
can do either. They can take it lump sum, or they can take it 24.
So technically, you think about that, really what changes could be made, because we have people that if theirs is split up through their pay periods, when would that end where they receive their full payment like everyone else if the change was made?
So everybody.
Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I think you're asking whether if you adopted Dr. Nguyen's motion, when that would happen. So what would happen is employees who are currently receiving it would still get their full pay through the pay cycle for the 2019-20 school year.
Okay.
Which, you know, I think the final pay you get is like in August on that pay cycle.
Okay.
It would be for the 2021 school year that you would get that if you earn the degree or the educational attainment during the 2021 school year, or I guess if you earned it over the summer, awarded in August, would be how I would interpret it.
I would agree with Janie, because the reality is that it's just like a step movement with our teachers, in which you're getting that bonus because that additional pay because you received the PhD. Once we take it back away, it's like, well, what would have been the point of get the PhD? Because now I'm back to the same master's level of pay, as if I wouldn't have even gotten it. Because this will reduce the salary, the annual salary of our employees. And I agree that we need more time to really see the impact, do market studies on how our pay is compared to others, as well as to be able to see, should we build that stipends into that package of what they instantly get. So I think I agree with Janie that we should look at this in January.
Well, again, remember we had comparisons. So these ideas are not that different from our peers. And actually in Wyandotte County, our peers are Turner and Bonner. Piper, maybe similar tax base, but Johnson County schools have been determined by legislative post audits not to be our peers. So that's, again, it's kind of a side discussion, but again, the fact that again, the intent of the motion was that looking for some cost savings for a year. Now, again, to answer Yolanda's original question, 2019-20 contracts, there's no impact, none. Now, we can, I can roll up the flagpole, hopefully not, 50 more proposals. You can roll down the flagpole, 50 more proposals. But at the end of the night and at the end of June 30th, if we're not provided funds, we're going to have to reconsider, and we may have to make some of these cuts. That's okay. But
go ahead and just vote.
Excuse me, ma'am, but that we have to start thinking. Let's start thinking that we may have to make some cuts. These are soft sacrifices. No, a dime out of anybody's paycheck is serious, but a job, no one is talking about, and I'm going to kind of add a little caveat here. The poison prior to this evening, the fear tactics, really unprofessional. But at some time, we're going to have to consider, we're going to have to make some cuts. And so we want to make some serious, less threatening kind of cuts.
Why is it that we keep getting alleged with fear cut? I have big concerns, Maxine, relating to the language Dr. Wynn is using. So,
Dr. Yeager, if you could listen to, excuse me.
So I think there's a big concern relating to fear tactics and allegations. I'm not sure why we continue to bring that up in conversation. It's really concerning to me.
And see, one of the things that we're trying to do is we hear what you're saying and we're listening. And what we want to do is have everyone be able to have an opportunity to give feedback, and then let's just move on. Now, you have given us the suggestion of what we could do as far as voting on it. Let's go ahead. We've had discussion. People have submitted what their thoughts are. Let's vote on it and let's move on, because to my knowledge, you said you had about 9.
Sure, but let's be realistic. Excuse me, let's be realistic. Mr. Covington for the past month has told us we don't know what we're getting. So if that isn't fearful to you, then yeah, that word is used I don't think Mr. Covington used fear, because I'm not putting words in his mouth. But when and I'm sure you read the KSB newsletter, the Tallman report said there may be almost $400 million cut from the K-12 budget. That is fearful.
But we should not be intimidating people.
No,
I'm not trying to intimidate. These are real issues. Okay,
so
but
the budget,
you can call.
Susan,
the budget can I? Okay.
Sorry. I would love to hear what Dr. Faust has to say, because I actually had a question for him. So I would love to hear what he has to say.
So the budget that we are intending to bring to the board that we're working on doesn't require any personnel cuts. We are.
What did you say?
I said the budget that we're looking at bringing to the board does not require any personnel cuts. What we have to look at is, so right now we have the 19-20 budget. The way that looks at is that we were supposed to get, let's say $5 million. Chances are that's not what we're going to get. So we have to hold that out to the side, and we operate in the budget that we currently have. We have to look within the budget that does not require any personnel cuts, because we have ways of looking at it, and it's not just random, the cuts. You want to make huge cuts, so $1 million. $2 million, 3, there are programs that we have that will give us that residual to cut from that budget. These little ones will not give you what you are looking for when you're looking at a $300 million budget. There are items in there that we'll be able to show you. This is exactly where this came from. This is what it looks like. This is where we need to move the money. But this, even in a budget, our budget is healthy. And when we think about a healthy budget, we aren't one who is looking at, if we don't get the 5 point whatever in new money, of course it will be a snag to us, but that's not going to put us under. Mm-hmm. So I don't want us to be in a panic mode right now, because we hadn't even gone through the entire budget to provide you with an educated opportunity to look. So I don't want you to think that we don't have an operation, that we don't have something in place that we can give to you. We do plan to, just as we did before, take you through where the cuts were, letting you look at everything before you take it out to public. So we want to have those small budget sessions with the board, but I don't think we want to say that even if they don't give us the money, and we're going to bank on, let's say they don't give it to us, we still have with the cuts that are in there, those things that are in there that have not provided any type of, we call it positive insight. There are things in our budget that we can cut out that will not put a scare, that will not allow it. We'll continue to be able to operate. Let's say that we'll be able to continue to operate with the budget that we're current, if we are able to look at the budget holistically and make a proposal to the board. That's what we want to be able to do, to give you the opportunity to look at everything before you were chopping here, we're chopping there, because honestly, these small, and I'll say they're small as opposed to what the budget looks like, that's not the money. You won't get 5.5 million out of these little small cuts, but we can find that. We'll have to find that money for you in some of these programs that we have.
Again, I'll respond that when you look at Piper, Turner, Bonner Springs, some of these provisions are not provided. These may be small potatoes, if I can take that from your comments, but again, these are also ways that budgets are trimmed that are not painful. So whether you get $100,000, that may be $100,000, and it may be philosophical, because when we're dealing with a $400 million budget tonight. I deal with $10 billion budgets, and that's how you do. Sometimes have to backfill when you're not going to get it, but nevertheless, call for the question.
I also think there'll be
but let me add this with.
Are there any questions?
Let me add this with Dr. Yeager and Ms. Drew. An observation. We have the authority, we have the opportunity to take as you say, an intelligent approach to discussing different fringe benefits that provide revenue, that also cost revenue. And so it is something that while you may not be interested in doing, and that's quite obvious, but
again,
this is the.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt, and I'm going to have Susan to go ahead and read the motion so we can go.
I don't get it. When I'm talking, you guys interrupt me, but I always stop. But at the end of the day, there's no fear tactic, and so this is, I guess, why the rumors went, the reality went out. No one's trying to scare anybody. We're just trying to, perhaps in a COVID COVID-19 environment, right size a district, and if there's no consideration given, there's no consideration given. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to let's say make cuts, consider some cuts, and that no one's trying to burn anybody. So call for the question.
Any questions?
So are we still in this? We're still in discussion, right? Are we still in
Any
discussion?
questions you can ask?
Okay.
Well, but we call, yeah, we're in discussion, but Valdez called for the question for a voting.
Oh, okay.
Although, do you have a question?
Well, my question is, Dr. Wynn, I know you have some things that you want to go over. My question really to you is, with the things that Dr. Faust has said tonight, and I understand the things that we're talking about with the contracts, should we really be looking at other places to get this savings versus going, and I'm going to use the word gutting the contracts? Should we really be looking at?
No, excuse me. I'm not attempting to gut any contracts. I have not mentioned any salary, any reference to any salary. These were fringe benefits, soft cuts that are less painful. So let me please correct you with that.
Okay, that's no
and
problem.
Remember, we also have put, we had teacher negotiations, and I would welcome, and I know they would, when Mr. Goheen, the next time you go into there, you offer some of these soft words. See if it helps negotiations go. If you understand what I'm saying, but to say that hey, if we got the money, as it appears the sentiment is tonight, we've got the money. So May 15th come, and we're good. So please, Ms. Clark, you note I haven't said anything about cutting salaries. I haven't said anything about any
additional
big-ticket items.
I get that. My question where I was going with this is, does it make sense for us to evaluate all of this stuff outside of now? So we've talked about January a lot. Does it make sense to table these conversations until January, all of them, versus going one by one? It's just a question.
Tell you what, it doesn't make sense to table anything when we have the when we have the responsibility to review all budgets. Now, when people are not maybe in the habit of making budgets, then there is one attitude.
I get it.
And so since I am in the habit of making budgets, since it is the responsibility, since there is pushback for change, then I will look over my list, review if, give me 2 minutes to whether or not I make any other comments. Thank you.
And you're fine. I'm used to budget season. So if budget season should have happened in January, I wish we would have done that in January to make things change.
Okay, so Susan, could you please read the motion so that we can go ahead and move forward, and then I'll and vote, and we'll go through.
Okay, I believe, if I'm correct, it's the board will review in January 2021, along with salary schedules and benefit packages, only paying educational stipends for administrators once upon attainment, not annually.
Are there any questions?
So to clarify, this motion is saying that we won't take any action tonight, but we'll take it in January.
On that topic.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Okay, so Susan, would you do the roll call? Could I get it seconded, please?
It's been seconded.
Okay, all right, so would you go ahead and do the roll call vote, and we'll vote and move on.
Maxine Drew.
Maxine Drew, yes.
Yolanda Clark.
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Janie Humphreys.
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez.
Randy Lopez, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page.
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Valdenia Wynn.
Dr. Valdenia Wynn, yes.
Stacy Yeager.
Stacy, yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. I would like to recommend that we make a motion to hold off on any more on this discussion until we can get the budget report from Mr. Covington, So that would give us a little bit more information for us to consider, because it seems like we're going to be extended even more so.
Okay, I'd like to counter that, Madam Chair. Give me 2 minutes, take a break, and then we can address that if you mind. Would you mind?
You want to take a 2-minute break and then come back and continue discussing it?
Yes.
I don't want to do that. I want to get a motion if
Well,
anyone.
Mrs. Clark asked for us to consider.
Yeah, I think she's asking for a minute to consider whether she's willing to consent to that is what I think she's asking.
Okay, then I can go with that. Thank you.
Do we need to recess for 2 minutes or just sit here and?
A restroom break would be appreciated by.
2-minute break. Thank you. Can I get a motion?
Motion for
Second.
Break at 6:44, come back at 6:46. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you.
Are you ready, Dr. Ms. Drew?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. I guess I would like to say that to the listening public, hopefully the teachers, the nutrition workers, the bus drivers, the custodians, that we have more than enough money. We don't have anything to worry about. So all our people will have adequate PPE equipment. Greg, that you shouldn't have any problem now settling any contracts. And so I look forward to us making our workforce improve their lifestyle, improve their standard of living, because they pay the bills. So I've learned a lot this evening. There are contracts that we did not see for over a year, and until we had this meeting, we never did see them. Greg, I don't believe that everything is like you say it is, but we're gonna take the spirit and move forward. And so for 2020, what is this, 2021, we're gonna settle contracts and everything is gonna be great. So I appreciate your time, ladies and gentlemen, and good night.
So therefore, excuse me, so I need a motion, please, that we table the other
So
information.
moved. And I also, so moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we will table the other provisions to discuss in relation to contracts at another meeting. All those in favor, say aye.
Can I, before we,
Question. I'm sorry, question.
okay, now, we did say January. So is this gonna come up January for some of this?
I think if you're tabling it for clarity, you ought to specify when you're
Yeah, I'd like some, because we do that too often. We say another meeting, then sometimes the other meeting doesn't come up because something else comes up. So
Okay,
can
thank
we
you for
say
clarifying.
January?
It will be tabled for us to be able to address at our budget meeting that is scheduled to come up. And
No.
then for those items that she mentioned, it will be tabled for, that we voted on, will be tabled to January.
Okay.
Dr. Yeager?
I think you need to let the person making the motion decide when they want to table it too.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, let's table it, and we will start all our budget items from this vote in January. So we won't get caught like this next year.
Thank you. So the
So
motion,
moved.
Susan?
Question.
Oh, question, I'm sorry. Thank you, Dr. Yeager. No question? Susan, could you read the motion and then do the roll call vote?
You're on mute, Susan. Unmute, Susan.
Okay. Kansas City Board of Education table contract discussions until further contract discussions until January 2021. Is that correct?
No.
No?
Oh, okay. You said table further contract discussions?
Yes.
Okay,
Is that correct?
yeah.
Valdivia?
Is it table further or is it table all? Because we've already placed some things to be talked about in January. So is it all or some?
The further information that she had that she was going to present tonight.
Right, so will we start over with contract information in January fresh, or are we just picking up where we left off?
You have, by your action taken this evening, you have essentially locked down no other action. And Greg, you please inform me. Between now, 2021 is over, correct?
As far as the administrative contracts
Mm-hmm.
that are in effect, those are gonna, if you don't take action to
Correct.
Change
do
anything.
something with those tonight, then those are gonna be rolled over for the
Correct.
next.
So we didn't take any action tonight. So
Yeah.
what we start in January is new. Would actually be 21, 22.
Yes.
Right. You'd be looking at modifications to the contracts, the benefit packages, and things of that nature at that date in January.
But we did do one thing, which is already in existence. We need to see the contracts. Now, I'm not trying to beat that to death, but we do need to see them. Because
Right.
there's a split on whether we saw them or we didn't. We need to see them. And I'm not bringing it up, but yeah.
You asked to see the contracts. I think you've seen them and seen all the benefit packages at this point.
But moving forward, we're going to see them in the store.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I understand.
Yeah.
Can we go ahead and vote, please?
And make sure Susan has that down as a directive to the administration.
It'll be part of the minutes.
Okay, thank you. Could you call for the vote, please?
Yes. Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Janie Humphreys,
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy Lopez, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
On the Brownie page, yes.
Valdivia Nguyen,
Dr. Valdina Nguyen, yes.
Stacy Yeager.
Stacy, yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Are there any other comments by board members? If not, this meeting is adjourned. You all have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.